Welcome, fearfully and wonderfully made humans. It's me, Diana, from Through the Valley Therapy. I'm excited for today's episode as we dive into an insightful conversation with Leonardo Aguilar. Did I say that right? Aguilar? No,
Aguilar.
Aguilar. Okay. I had the pleasure of connecting with him through the Christian mental health professional group that we're both part of, and we've shared some really thought-provoking conversations. Leonardo is a bilingual licensed clinical social worker practicing in both English and Spanish, with over 10 years of experience working with children, adolescents, and families in a variety of settings, including outpatient, schools, and community mental health. He holds a passion for helping people of faith navigate the complexities of their mental health, integrating their spiritual beliefs into the healing process. As the founder of a mindful process therapy, Leonardo emphasizes mindfulness based interventions to help his clients manage anxiety, depression, and trauma. Today, we'll be discussing the mental health challenges men face, particularly Hispanic men. Though Leonardo's insights apply to all men, we'll explore how cultural expectations, family dynamics, and faith play significant roles in shaping their experiences. Leonardo's expertise in helping men break free from stereotypes and embrace vulnerability while strengthening their faith is sure to provide valuable takeaways for all listeners. Well, Leonardo, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. That was a nice intro. It's like, can I get a copy of that?
Yeah, it'll be in the transcript.
Not an LCSW, LMHC, so licensed mental health counselor. It's all good.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry. Yeah. Well, let's talk of that for a second. Let's talk about that, the differences. Because you're right. Like people ask that question all the time, especially in our population. Like, well, what's the difference? Well, I can't even say it in Spanish. What's the difference? Like people will come up to me and ask that, like, oh, you're all the same. Some people are like, oh, you a shrink? And I'm like, no. Like, so go ahead, explain what the
Uh,
difference is.
That's a show called Shrinking. Have you? I think it's on Apple. Yeah. Have you seen it?
No.
I think it's pretty good. It's with this dude. I forgot his name. Tall guy. He did Forgetting Sarah Marshall. Forgot his name right now. He's on everybody. What is it? How I Met Your Mother. Yeah, that guy. So
Oh, okay. What's his name? What's his name? I know who you're talking about. He was Doogie Howser, right? The one that played Doogie Howser.
taller, tall
Oh,
guy.
oh, I don't remember. I never watched How to Emit. Okay, so anyway, let's explain the difference between LCSW, LMHC, LMFT, ABCDEFG. No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. So in the shrink, right? The shrink gets the PsyDs and PhD. So yeah, we have so many different. I love it because we have so many different backgrounds. So let's start, I guess, with the one that because you're LMHC too, right? Yeah.
Yes.
For health counselors, we just have a master's in psychology, right? So
Hmm.
I think mine was in counseling psychology. I know people have a master's in clinical psychology. So there's different psychology routes. So even in our, that's what I've seen. So even in
Yeah.
to become an LMHC, you can have different kind of degrees. LCSW, and I say that because I've had the experience.
Mm,
LCSWs, which stands for Licensed Clinical Social Workers, right?
right.
They do adhere to, like, social workers have a protected title to themselves, I think, and I like that because they're very proud of what they do, right? So I think I say, like, I'm not a social worker by education, but by trade in a way, because I've worked in the Ryan White program for so long, helping people in the medical case management,
Mm.
helping people with HIV and AIDS, and for that, doing different kinds of advocacy work and legal. And so that goes a lot of my background and what I still put into my practice, right? So I like they are very social work driven. So that's another different kind of methodologies, the way that they do therapy, right? So they see the world in a different way, perhaps the person that went to psychology. And then you have the LMFTs, licensed marriage and family therapists. So they have another kind of understanding of family dynamics, and they have more expertise in that. The genogram, right? Have
Yes.
you ever got a genogram done?
Yes, I did because I had to take that class, marriage and family therapy, to graduate. So
Ooh.
definitely, the professor made us do the genera, and I was like, "Whoa!"
Yeah, I did that too. Yeah. And so they have different specialties, right? So
Mhm.
like the fact that we all have different ways to look at a problem, right? So if you go to one therapist, they might, see, okay, we're gonna tackle it this way. We're gonna focus on more on the family dynamics and how that affects, but also focus. Another one may have, no, let's do more of the individualistic because you have this is your specific culture. So there's so many different ways to look at a problem, and I think having different therapists do different things
Yeah,
differently is good. And we're
right.
all, we still kind of like look at things from one view of like if you have like if we get a little more specific, like CBT, right? Cognitive behavioral therapy. You look at it from a cognitive behavioral therapy standpoint. And
Right.
you can have the three therapists do the same kind of therapy, the
Hmm.
LMHC and LCSW, but they have their own flavor to it, right?
Yeah,
So
exactly. We're not a one size fit all.
no, definitely.
No. And so what made you focus on immigrant and Hispanic men's mental health?
Oh man. So I'm an immigrant myself. So I came here when I was 13,
From?
Uruguay.
Okay.
Uruguay for those that uh
Uruguay for us Americans.
yeah.
I mean, I'm a Latina, but I was born here. So yeah, Uruguay. Uruguay?
Yeah,
Uruguay?
Uruguay.
Uruguay. Okay. Okay. And I
There-
said your name right? Leonardo? Leonardo.
yeah, not of them. Yeah,
I love it. Leonardo. He rolled his R's. I love it.
I did. Yeah. Sometimes
Okay.
I do have to say Leonardo. So it's already biased and like it's already strange, but I do like to say my own name in my
Yes.
Leonardo. So
Yeah,
it's
I love it. And it sounds much more prettier than I said it. That's for sure. I love. Well, it's the same with my name. Honestly, I have a lot of people call me Diane. I'm like, no, it's Diana with an A. You know what? Just call me Diana because
Diana.
that's my name, Diana.
Yeah, Diana. There you
Right.
go. Yeah.
So, but
I
most
love
people call me
working.
Diane.
Yeah, Diane. No,
Okay.
Diane.
So back to the immigrant and because you're an immigrant and
Right.
then
And that's how
Hispanic. Yeah, go ahead.
Hispanic and I'm a male too. So I think right now, like as you said, I serve women and men, but I think God has also put in my heart to serve men because men do, and I know we talk today more about that. What that means for a man to actually seek counseling. And what I've heard from men is like, oh, I chose you because it's funny. Like even if it's different um culture, right? Doesn't have to be Hispanic, but the fact that you are Hispanic because
Mm,
our cultures are similar, right? So and so when we talk about culture, the collectivistic culture versus the individualistic, right? So if we get into that different set of things,
yeah.
how Hispanics we have this familiarismo, right? Very
Mm,
oriented, right?
yes.
And so I love being able to communicate with the people that are part of me, and so I like to have that as a resource, that and when one says, oh, I get you, we never get that person specifically, but there are different things that we can understand because different similarities that we live, and I think people do value that.
Yes. More and
Yeah,
more now, especially now that we're going into churches and the Black and Brown communities and really getting them to understand that you don't have to hold on to all that activation in the brain and body, right? The trauma, right? Anymore. And there's better ways of communicating and still being collective because I don't know if you felt this, Leonardo, growing up. Did you come to Miami?
I went to Miami directly from Uruguay. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So that's a whole different culture in itself. Miami, no, Dade County, Broward County, and Palm Beach County,
Mhm.
comparatively to the rest of Florida,
Oh yeah.
right? Right. And so it's also understanding like even in this country, the USA, we have different cultures in America and different Latin cultures and stuff. But for you, when you came to Miami, wow, at 13, and I know I have had to work with a lot of adolescents who are first immigration here as a teenager being thrown into one of these public schools.
Yeah,
Tell me, do you mind talking about your experience a little?
for sure. Yeah, I love doing that.
Okay, so tell me like what was it going on in your brain at that time or on your mind? Because I know with my personal experience, even though I'm born here, I still know at home it was one culture. In the public schools, it was a whole different culture. And I did not, I've always felt weird because I did not feel like I belonged to either one.
Yeah. So I think I had a good experience, and I say why. I was fortunate to be uh put into a school. So it's close to my house, and it's no longer, I think it was called Aspira. So Aspire, but
Mm,
Aspira. It's
hmm.
Aspira Charter Schools in
Okay.
Miami. And it was very Hispanic friendly, right? Our the director was Puerto Rican.
Mm.
And
Woo-hoo. I'm
yeah,
sorry. I'm half.
Puerto Rican big one.
Sí.
Right?
Puertorriqueña.
And it was really nice. And I remember there was this professor, I never forget, there was this professor it was a math professor. He was from one of the Guayanas, right? No, close to the Venezuela. And
Hmm.
spoke Spanish. Like he would like it was so cool because he would speak Spanish to me in the middle of the class. And that was like when I was like, wow, this dude is really wants to make sure that I got it. And yeah, and actually math was fun because I kind of like so I came when I was in seventh. So I finished in Uruguay is different. So we don't have like elementary, middle, and senior like high school. We have basically elementary and then high school, basically
Oh,
that.
okay.
So I had finished first year of high school, basically liceo in Uruguay, and so I basically came and then but had to do half of seventh grade because of when I came like in December.
Hmm.
I came in December 24th, 2001. Remember that?
Okay.
So I was half year. So I was like, I went in there and I kind of knew a lot. So I remember that year I was doing good in math. My teacher like is like, oh, he knows his stuff. So I think it was for me it was a good experience. I know that's not for everybody. I also like the fact that it was an ESOL. I don't know if you know about what ESOL is.
Well, explain it to I do know it is because I worked in the Broward County school system. So explain to the listener who might be somewhere else that, in the middle of nowhere that doesn't even know what that means.
ESOL is, I don't know if it's like a program, but I think it's just something that you, if you come specifically from another country, you are put into a specific set of, there's different advantages that you have, right? So you can, take a little longer for tests, and you're put in a cohort of, for example, I was in a cohort of, students were Hispanic also. So there was a community-based part. And so I think it
Mm,
goes well with,
right.
our, comunidad hispana, because we get put into this
Hmm.
community where this ESOL and we actually get to speak Spanish with ourselves. So that was helpful, right? Because yeah, coming to another country, being, you know, and I had my sisters from Uruguay, so I left them, we left my sisters, older sisters. So yeah,
Did you
there's
have guilt for that? Because I do know when I work with immigrants, they have guilt, some of the parents or, because they come here for a better life,
yeah,
right? And then you leave family behind. I know with my own experience, my mom's from Colombia.
yeah,
And I know that she came and worked because she made it here. And so she had to work her butt off to send money back because she comes from
yeah,
a very poor place. And I
yeah,
didn't understand that being an American because I'm American, right? And so this is the thing. It's like the trauma comparison. Like, you do not know you're an American, but she was kind of not validating my own experience of being this American in a school system and having teenage problems. And I had no one to talk to at home because you see what I'm getting at.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
something I see in a lot of immigrants, and I'm sure you do too. So, can we touch on that a little bit?
Course, yeah. The guilt, I think that's universally, I think it's not even three-part tier, like tier, right?
Mhm.
So for me specifically, maybe the guilt came in me when I was older. When I was just came in, it was just trying to maneuver everything that was going on. Yeah, I think there's the guilt and the hope that, man, I wish my sisters, would have been here, that have the same chances that I got to become a citizen. Like I have dual citizenship. That's something I can say that I have, thank God. So different things. I think if you want to maybe the guilt, perhaps I think the father and the mother hold more the guilt. Maybe not so much the brother. I think the brother also can. In my case, it wasn't so much that experience.
Mhm.
It was that desire of, man, I wish that, first of all, I wish they were together again. And when especially when you go back, like if you get the chance, I know some people don't have the chance to go back, which I'm privileged to be able to have gone back and visit because they would obtain, residency, through my father, which was a citizenship, became a citizen, so that I was able to get citizenship. So then you go back and then there is that separation again. So every time we get together, there is also the grieving that kind of gets put. And that's a weird feeling. Like we talk about it with my sister in Uruguay a lot, so I think she does, that touches her a lot.
Yeah.
There's that
So,
separation all over, like, and it's a protective factor because then I think then you don't want to get too attached again because then you don't again anymore.
right.
So there's that inner fight, like inner struggle is like, gotta. So there's so many components to being an immigrant that, unless you lived it or work with people that
Right.
are,
And you learn to have compassion for it, right? Because that's our job. Like I know unconditional positive regard. I talk about that all the time with Carl Rogers and just having that understanding. That's why a lot of Black Indigenous people of color, BIPOC and Latinx, I know I use those terms because I worked with young people, teenagers all the time. And so back in the day, now I only see adults, but it is, and these are conversations I have with people because I see all walks of life personally as well. And some, have strong political mindsets and everything, and that's fine, but they get triggered or activated by a word like
mm,
immigration, right? And then right away, it's just like, okay, are you listening to try to understand? Or are you just listening out of fear and you're just trying to respond, right?
yeah.
So, what do you see as the most difficult challenge right now for mental health, especially for Hispanic men?
Mm. I think a combination of, I would say anxiety, uh, and so we get, and it's funny because for Hispanics, we have different ways of kind of like talking about mental health. And
Mm,
so we say, oh, tengo un ataque de nervios. I have a nerve attack. Or mis nervios están de punta, like I'm on edge. Or, oh, qué susto. Like, and it's also, when you look at it, like even looking at it from the academia standpoint, susto even feels like a out of soulful experience. So Hispanics are very spiritual, like in the way that so being able to reconcile all that. And,
mm,
and so Hispanic men and Hispanics, I think it's a lot of the I'm no estoy loco, I'm not crazy, right? So if you talk mental health, I've gotten it from people. It's like, well, I don't need a therapist because no estoy loco, I'm not crazy. So what has been basically filtered in the Hispanic community is that if you not only, I think that's a more universal, but I think it's very prone to Hispanics where it's like, yeah, I think it's one of the strong suits for Hispanics, which we are so familiar. But because we're so familiar, then it's like, well, I shouldn't need it because I got my family. So
wow.
my family should be the one that talks to me, or I shouldn't need to go see a shrink. I'm not crazy.
Right.
I need to talk to and that leaves this, sometimes our experience is being invalidated because we're not able to say, well, you know what, but I'm gonna talk to my mom, but what if the issue is with my mom? Because I
Yeah.
can't, I can't, my mom doesn't stand my wife or my girlfriend and I just need to talk to somebody about it.
Right.
But I should be able to figure it out myself, right? That I don't need a therapist because I'm not, I don't
Well, what do you think is the wall that they're hitting or the understanding of what therapy is? Because I know I have my opinion and what I've heard in the past from the families that I served back in the day, because I know it's like I did not trust the system, right? Or we're raised, right? We're like, no dice nada. No dice nada. Esto en la casa. Eso todo,
Yeah.
and then you go and you figure like, okay, this doesn't feel right, and then you
Mhm.
have emotionally immature parents because of their traumatic situation and they think that's normal. And then,
Yeah.
how do you do therapy with a family? Say you have a man coming in finally, right?
Yeah.
Mi esposa dice que yo necesito ayuda.
Yeah. My
Yeah.
wife, I need help, right?
Yeah.
let me tell you something. If I got the dude to come,
Hmm.
that's already like I'm just celebrating. So that actually doesn't happen often. So what you just described, it's will be the goal of the therapeutic to actually get the guy to come. Because the fact because why? Because there's so much expectations for men when we talk about men, right? So when your question was so layered, right? So we got the fear of first of just man, I don't want to go see anybody because then if I say something that I shouldn't say, then they might call the cops on me. Or
Wow.
so, I don't, especially last year when the new rule, the law that came in, there was a law that you couldn't transport people, and that was a lot of things were going on. If like, or you couldn't go
Yeah.
to the doctor. There was a lot of fear. It was a law that was in, and thank God there was a lot of myths, so debunked. And I was fortunate enough to actually be part of the some groups that were actually giving information. No, this you can still go to the doctor. They're not going to deny you coverage, and
Right.
you don't have to say you don't have to they don't have to know they're not the cops. You don't have to tell them that you don't have papers. So I think from a structural, so there's so many ways to look at things. Structural, right? Being able to actually get people, say, well, I do need help, but then can I do it? Can I go? And I know, if I go, how do I go? Like, can I afford it, or is there something that I can do? So I think just getting to see that's already even that's a whole bottle. And
Hmm.
we can talk so many of the various, different so many things they'll go into that. If the guy came in, I was just actually honor the fact they came in. So actually use that. So when we talk about machismo, right? So let's put that the so I love talking about machismo because I there's so many layers to machismo, right?
Hmm.
People forget about talking about the caballerismo, right?
Okay.
Caballerismo, which is like the being, sort of the very, very, proper and like very
A gentleman. That's
gentleman.
how I see it, like caballero and gentleman. And then machismo is that high testosterone, I'm it, I'm the man, you're a peon, you're the female kind of thing. So let's go in there for a little bit for
Yeah,
both. Go
yeah, yeah,
ahead.
sure. So I like to actually differentiate that
Mm.
because if we look at it, and I like to look at things sometimes academically because it kind of like says there's research that's been done here. So caballerismo is part of machismo. So if the man is coming,
Mm-hmm.
so I have either I can hold space for that man to actually be able to say, hey, actually congratulate, really be from a place of you're here. So, actually have, the positive side of what means to be a man for the Hispanic community, which is so many different things.
Well, name a few because, like, remember that my listener hopefully will be Hispanic men, some of them, and also women, and also I teach cultural competency to people that don't understand different cultures. So I want them to understand these things because some people listen and they get, triggered. Oh, these immigrants and stuff. And I'm just like, no, can you please just try to understand the situation before you give me a whole bunch of opinions?
Yeah. So Hispanic men, right?
Right. Yes.
So when we think about machismo, right? The whole talk is that, men don't let women, or don't let women do, things. So then that's why women sometimes don't go to the doctor because men don't want them to go or the daughter. There's this protective side. So
Mm-hmm.
I like to look at things from a value standpoint, right? I practice acceptance and commitment therapy, which that gives me it goes, and when I say value, it's not I value family. It's more about qualities of behavior. So when we think about to act in ways that are protecting. So in which way? So like we look at men that want to protect, right? So in this is part of them. And also, I'm not saying that there's not a way that you do it that can be. I'm putting quotations for those who can hear me. Toxic, right? Because that the toxic masculinity, which has been, a lot talked a lot. What I'm saying is that there's a part of that person, that man, that there is a value hidden in there, which is guiding their behavior
Mm-hmm.
is to protect the people that they care about.
Mm-hmm.
In many ways, it's they have not been taught how to do that properly or in ways that are inviting and there are compassionate and they are, caring to their whole family, that can be, in many ways, even like, um, that they feel that, what, my wife feels that I'm actually not trying to mandarla, right? To like actually take over her life.
Right.
So so when I said, so when a person comes in, there is a level of, what, the machismo has that, right? Why do men, many times, if you think of the whys, right? Why do men feel that, that they have to have this persona of, I have to be, so strong, and I have to be,
Right.
this testosterone thing, alpha male kind of thing. Because, if you want to look at it from many different facets spiritually, like, there is a different responsibility for the man, right? That
Yes.
have, if you look at it from a biblical standpoint,
Hmm.
that responsibility, men is, they have a hard time to cope with that. I
Okay.
struggle with that as a man myself, as a, father. And so that is like, okay, well, you know what? I can't be weak. And what does weakness mean? Vulnerability. I can't tell my wife that I feel scared. I can't
Mm-hmm.
tell my wife that I feel anxious, because
Mm-hmm.
that would show I am weak.
Mm.
So, and that's a
But
much,
are you? But are you weak if you show that?
I don't believe so. I believe
Exactly.
showing vulnerability, actually expressing that I at times don't know how to do things correctly, and it's and I don't know where I'm going, but I feel anxious about that.
Hmm.
I seek help, and and actually it's a sign of strength. It's a
Right.
sign of actually wisdom, because I'm able to utilize my resources effectively.
Wait, and so what I'm hearing is that you're, and I see this too, remember, because I am female, married to a male, and so what I see in is just that they want the protection. Remember, like you were talking, they want to protect the family or protect who they are. And biblically speaking, though, we're meant to be in community, not to be a man on our own island or a
Mhm,
human on our own island. And
mhm,
so a lot of it's learned behavior as well. Learn behavior of like, oh, my papi, I saw that con mi papa, and all this, and this is how they treated. And sometimes that's what we do. Like we're young, we're little, that's what we think because we're not born knowing how to be in relationships. We're taught by the village that raises us. And
mhm.
then we sometimes excuse it. Well, yo soy Latina. That's why I yell.
There you go. And if you don't like it, then go marry a non-Latino.
Yeah,
And,
but
and I say partly in a way, because, and I say that for the men, right? Well, yo soy así, I don't, and if you don't like it, then go marry a guy that, is weaker, that doesn't show. And that leaves, so, it just, man, if we can, yes, that's how I currently am because of this and this. And I struggle with that. And I'm sorry I behave that way, because I know that affects you.
mm,
I'm gonna try to be more mindful about that and help me. And I need your help when I do it. Please let me know when that behavior comes up. Because I want to make sure that you don't feel that I'm, walking over you, or I'm trying to, tell you what to do.
right. It sounds like maturity and learning communication skills, right?
Yeah.
It's like learning how to speak and evolve because that a lot of us are emotionally stunted or communication. And then it's the pride that gets because you either live in pride and ego or you live in humility and spirit.
Yeah. And I think for men, and I say this, and I even hear it in podcasts and things like that. I think, and I've heard it from clients. It's, I would say, it's not a catch-22, but it can be. It's
Mm,
not all the time, but unfortunately, men have experienced. You know what? Why bother? Because when I try to be vulnerable, it's look.
mm,
And I've heard it from men that have done it, and their partners have looked at it, their family, like, because it's so bizarre that when the male does it, I'm not saying this all the time, so it's not a generalization, but it is happening. So
mm-hmm.
there's the other side of the coin where men have learned, believe me, I tried, but when I done it, it's not received the way that I intended it. And I
Wow.
go back to just trying to suppress it and deal with it on my own.
Mm,
So it's also that side of the experience that I don't think it's talked a lot. I mean, which is like men, it's not like all the time. There is that level of because, like I said, it comes from somewhere, and I think somewhere it comes from is that that man has tried to be vulnerable to their own, to whatever they thought that meant, and at times that has been received in a way that hasn't been validated.
Wow. That's the key word, validation,
Yeah.
right?
I've also seen that. So that's a work in itself because, I never, when you mention something, unconditional positive regard,
Mm,
whatever the person comes in, right? I take it, right?
yeah.
They're telling me that I'm not here to say, well, no, are you sure about that? Are you sure you heard it right? Because I'm sure if you told your wife that you're sad, she would have said, oh, don't be sad, or at least hug you.
Oh my gosh, that's gaslighting. And
Really?
that's what that's
Like that? Like, you know, I don't think so, man. Come on. It's just sad, dude.
yeah, but that's the difference between going to a professional who's trained because like the reason we know what we know, Leonardo, right? Were you born knowing this stuff?
No.
No, it was a training. I still go into training. I still like you're teaching me right now more
Mm,
and more. I go into my CEUs or and above. I listen to things because I want to be the best professional person for my clients because this is a calling on our
yeah.
lives, Leonardo, on your life too, because what you're talking about, you're breaking stigma in a population that is suffering too. Like we're a lot of us are suffering. I mean, anxiety and depression are through the roof in all cultures,
Mm-hmm.
in the church, outside the church. I don't care
Mm-hmm.
what color you are, what beautiful caramel, vanilla, whatever it is that you are, right? Inside our souls.
Mm-hmm.
Let's talk about that a little because now there's a difference too between the secular environment that we both worked at, right? And having to be clinical in science and everything. And now we are both Christians. So we
Mm-hmm.
see what goes on in spiritually and in the church,
Yeah.
right? And I know we have different denominations in the church
Mm-hmm.
too, right? So not only different Hispanic heritage, but because we all take pride, because I know being half Puerto Rican, half Colombian, it was just like, well, mira, tú sabes que ellos no hablan español muy bien, so don't pick up that. And I'm just sitting there like, I'm already trying to just be in America, being an American girl. Like, I'm trying to figure out who I am at home and everywhere. So let's talk about the church a little.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And what you see. Do you go to a Spanish church?
I do. Yeah.
Okay. All right. So, and I know at the church I attend, even though I attend the English service, they have a Hispanic church too. A
Cool.
Spanish, they call us. Yeah. And so it's all in Spanish. And I think I'm going to start making my husband go because he doesn't speak Spanish. And just for him to feel a different kind of culture, just to, and me too, because I want to connect with my people.
Yeah. So I so much to say about that. And so you're saying in the Hispanic church or the church itself? Because that's a different thing in itself.
Well, wherever the Lord leads you to talk about, because remember, like right now, whoever's listening, and hopefully will be some men and people that are in the church, recognize what you see there when
Yeah.
it comes to men.
So my observation is, I would say in the Christian English church, mental health is spoken more than the Hispanic church. I would say that 100%.
Yeah, now it
No.
wasn't 10 years ago, 20 years ago at all. Now they're finally realizing that, wait, you can have a therapist and Jesus, that
Oh,
you just don't pray everything away because honestly, any little thing that happened, it was like, oh, that's a demon. Oh, you're not praying enough. Oh, and that's spiritual bypassing, right?
mm,
So, but now,
the term again, spiritual bypassing.
yeah, spiritual bypass. I'm trying to find someone to speak on it with me, and I'm working on that because I'm not going to do a solo episode on it because I'd rather have the
Yeah.
conversation. But that's what happens in a lot of churches, and
Yeah.
I find with my clients, a lot of the women coming we're raising the purity culture and they're deconstructing. And I'm like, please understand it's a crisis of faith, but Jesus still wants to have a relationship with you because they
Yeah.
grew up in this, you
Yeah.
know. So
Yeah. And thank you. Yeah. So what yeah, so many things. You said something. I was like, it was triggering me to talk about something else, but I'm gonna stick to what you said. So mental health in the Hispanic and English church that is Christian. it's not talked about enough. It's being more talked about in the English church, like I said, because I've seen
Mhm.
the difference. I've done, like, we had an event for men, and it was actually, we did it bilingual, so it was nice. But it was,
Wow.
a lot of it was done in English because a lot of people are more English based. So we actually got to talk, about mental health, pornography addiction. We got to talk about anxiety, fear. It was amazing. And I like to do like things where the men can feel like this kind of questions, like, what has been the greatest fear? What has been one of the reasons you haven't shared? It was so unanimous saying, like, because when I shared, like, kind of like the thing that I talked about, like, it hasn't been validated, or the fear of rejection.
Wow.
Fear of rejection that men have.
Mm.
Uh, that I think it happens, when we talk about, like, being able to talk about mental health. And I think that happens so much in the Christian, because in the Christian realm, and I talk more about this on the pornography, right? So they're gonna bring pornography about it, because the people that get most attacked, when I say attacked, because there is also a spiritual component, I would say, for
Mhm.
with pornography, and the struggle, are men who are in the worship ministries and are pastors.
Yeah.
What that means, if I struggle with pornography and I'm a pastor or a worship leader, or I'm not going to talk about it, because first, I haven't gotten the okay. First, and it gets tricky, right? Because maybe you may be staff and you don't want to lose your employment.
Mhm.
There's also that piece of it, right? But there's that piece of, has my culture allowed me to share something I'm struggling with in a way that doesn't seem that I'm going to be looked down as sinful and just judged, and just, say I'm going to hell, or, I think, like I said, it has changed, it's changing more. But
Right.
historically, I think it's been that way, like, really the look down of, this is sinful behavior. And even when you talk about faith, right, the lack of faith, right, meaning if you are undergoing that, when you talked about the but spiritual bypassing, is if you're just not praying enough, or you're
Right.
not trusting the Lord enough, or you are not enough, meaning, like, so that, imagine how that exacerbates anxiety, where it's like, I'm already feeling anxiety, and now I have
Right.
anxiety because I'm not trusting God enough.
Mhm.
So, and I think what the church can do better is not to look at a you know issue like anxiety and simplify it, and into a simple Bible verse, or something that, and then just to repeat, like, it isn't as easy as just trust the Lord. It's
Mm.
not that easy. It wouldn't be happening in the scale that it is.
Right.
I
I mean,
think,
it's a training, I'm thinking, for people in the church to understand science of the body, of addiction, of why it's happening. Because there's not only people like, suffering. I mean, I actually have women that come to me that are Christian women who, have been keeping their virginity, and they're in their mid 20s, and they have come with so much anxiety. And then when they finally tell me what actually is happening, it's pornography.
mm,
And when they're finally have someone of faith going, okay, like, let's talk about the science and what's doing to your brain. Why do you feel you need to do this? How are we going to come up with the tools?
mm,
Right. And they're like, you're not going to tell me that I'm going to hell. I'm like, that's not my job. I'm a therapist. Like, that, you could go talk to some, but it's making people understand the way we're made and
yeah,
what's happening. What is it doing for you?
yeah. This is
Right.
what people do, that, or engage in the things they engage when there's a solace. There's a solace that they are obtaining. There's, when you talk about pornography, and I talk about this, there's also a connection.
Mm.
It's easier to connect with the person on the screen than it is with my wife.
Oof.
It's easier to be
Wow.
vulnerable. Yeah, that's deep right there. So that's its
Yeah.
own,
You
right?
just gave me goosebumps on that one. You're so right on. You're lonely, you're feeling a certain way. I mean, pornography, I know there's visual people. I don't know the science behind men being more visual than women, but you guys are. You're visual creatures. Like, I know that's why us girls get dolled
Yeah.
up and everything.
Tips, when you don't say the science, you say anecdotal, because
Ah,
anecdotal.
thank you. Yes. but it's just trying to have the understanding of why you're doing what you're doing and what is it doing for you and how do you want to change. Think about Jesus when, uh the woman that was caught in, in John 8. He just said he didn't condemn her. He didn't, he just said, now just try not to do it anymore. But there's tools, like we're hired because we have been gifted tools and a service, just like a medical doctor. You don't go around when someone has a belly ache and say, well, you're not praying enough.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Or,
Yeah. You're not eating, you're eating on the Sabbath, and that's why
right,
you have a stuff.
right. We
Right? Yeah.
in the church, we need to stop being so legalistic on things. Take the word of God as a tool. It is a tool. I mean, it's the main tool. He is the wonderful counselor, but you have to have the understanding that we have to understand us holistically.
Yeah. And I loved when you said, yeah, Jesus is the best counselor there is. And I love to ask this question. I also ask it in, my intake sessions, right? The first session we meet. How much of your spirituality do you want to be involved in our
I love
session?
I love that. Yes.
It's not up to me to decide how much. Like I would praying, and I've gotten people that they weren't, but then it's like, oh, can we pray? Like, and I love when that happens. It's like, oh, okay, they feel, and actually it speaks to the therapeutic relationship because if you have a person that you can pray with,
Mm,
she says something about what's going on, and that
mm,
bond relationship, if you when it comes to like therapy, I think relationship is the one of the most significant factors of change, the therapeutic relationship, than any other kind of technique. Even when because I train providers also, like I do trainings and stuff. And when I train, it's like the biggest skill is yourself. And
mm.
if you're Christian, I would say in the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
It's just you in the room and another person that it's and you have the honor to hear their story. That when we hear stories like, the Hispanic community, the immigration, that's the traumatic experience that they go to. Everything that we hear, that's an honor
Yeah.
for us to hear.
Yeah.
Uh,
So what actionable steps can church leaders take to foster an environment that's where mental health is openly discussed and men feel supported in seeking help?
I think, and especially leaders, I think normalize it. The normalization of mental health access and it's like, it's, that continue that message, first of all, that it's okay.
Mm.
That if you go and knowing that, hey, I'm gonna go talk to my pastor. I'm gonna talk. The pastor can do counseling. I'm not saying pastors don't are not counselors. They're, you know, from a layman standpoint and even professionally. But say, you know what, we met a few times. I think it would be great if you spoke to a counselor about this. I'm not saying that cannot be a support for you, but I think if you spoke to a therapist, what you're going through right now, that would be amazing. So to normalize it and to advocate for it, to advocate for mental health, to actually invite speakers like, Diana Rice. Oh, and
And Leonardo
Aguilar.
Leonardo
Yeah,
Aguilar. Ooh, did I say that right?
yeah, you got it. You got it. Aguilar. To speak about in different, to speak on even a Sunday. I will, because you know what, I say this. There's so many events, but bring us on a Sunday where
Mm,
worship and just, like I know sometimes, that's a little, I'm not gonna talk, but it's too much, but like just normalize it to the point where it's like it's part of Sunday, it's part of, the Sunday,
mhm.
church too. Like it's not only a special event. It is amazing. This have special events for mental health.
Yes.
That's a amazing step. Also, like this find be creative in how many ways can we normalize, mental health. And if as a leader I am actually struggling, be open. First of all, seek out support.
Right.
Be brave and if you're undergoing something, like actually imagine how powerful it is to hear from a pastor. You know what? Congregation, I'm undergoing some stuff right now and I'm seeing a therapist. Um,
Yeah.
so imagine how powerful, and this is what I've learned about my therapeutic experience.
Wow. That's vulnerability right there. I'm telling you right now, for that to happen in churches. Listen,
I'm
I
Uh-huh.
I created like no, I didn't create it. The Lord used me after a year of me saying, no, I don't want to do this. Those mental wellness ministry panels on purpose. Yes, Saturday, this past Saturday was the third one that I've moderated. So I moderate, I find and now you just gave me an idea, and I'm going to talk to my pastors because if you're listening to this, I'm coming at you. That I love this. Like I create the posters and I love creating events because that's something I did back in the day before I was a therapist. But
Mhm.
professionals, Christian professionals talking about a subject like parenting, but this time maybe men's mental health. I think I'm going to ask my pastor, maybe our next event, because we do it 2 times a year, to do that. And I want you as my one of my speakers. Will you
Great,
do
of
it?
course.
Yeah, but people come to me after that are not part of the church because people from all over the community come to these events and they're like, oh my goodness, you need to do this. You need to have it like as a traveling show. And I'm going, well, the thing is, I have reached out to the pastors, and when they're not ready, what do you do? You can't, you could give them some of them, honestly, some pastors think that they are the therapist.
Mm, yeah,
And
yeah.
that's dangerous in my book at times.
And like we said, we some pastors, I know a pastor, Pastor Juan Gallo, and I would say his name out loud. He's part of our group, and he's a great pastor. He's done pastoral work, and he's a licensed mental health counselor. But even then, or I think he's a registered. But even then, I'm going to pastor and I'm going to counsel. There's also a distinction of that. So I'm not
Yes.
pastors cannot be great counselors,
Mm-hmm.
but knowing limitations and limitations in a good way, because I want to I want to be your pastor and I want to know what, like, if I can't, if I don't, if you have a better fit seeing a counselor, it doesn't speak, bad about me as a pastor. It says, actually, you know what? I'm utilizing my wisdom and knowing that I recognize my limitation as a
Mm-hmm.
pastor counselor, as a counselor pastor, that this has become more than a spiritual issue and a mental health issue that needs it needs even like a diagnosis, and you need a professional guidance.
Right.
And I'm not saying that the pastor to say the pastor can become can become such an asset, even on like Hispanic communities, because we really look up to our pastor. So what I'm saying, when the pastor is able to advocate for mental health, that's a
Mm-hmm.
win-win-win-win, like.
Yes, for real. They can't carry the burden all on their own. We're all meant to be in community. We all have our gifts and talents. I just wrote that on my blog about mental health and church, like, what's your spiritual gift and how are you going to utilize it? So before we wrap everything up, I would like for just like practical tips on like what would be the first step. A man just heard this and said, oh man, okay, this is a sign I need to go get help. What would be your first step to do? Like where would they find a good quality Christian therapist, or if they're not Christian, like somewhere they could find like a therapist that is Latinx, Hispanic,
Yeah.
whatever it is, like what your needs are. And if they can't afford therapy,
Mhm.
because that's another thing in our community, we're not as rich as others, right? Some of us, where can they go to find quality
Well,
therapy? Because I know working in community mental health, sometimes I felt like I was red taped and it was just about chasing that Medicare or whatever, Medicaid and insurance, and then you're captured in diagnosing and medicating and all that. What would you recommend?
yeah. So if you haven't, so this two things, right? If you have insurance and you need to use your insurance, look out, for the provider portal, right? But if you're a part of a church, right, and you want to seek out a counselor, like I know we have the group created just for Christian therapists.
Mm-hmm.
We have therapists that have take insurance that are self-paid. We have so much access, and therapists do have, obviously depends on the therapist's sliding scale. So like, and they can look at a case, say, what does a sliding scale mean? Like they look at a case, your fee may be whatever, 120, let's say, but
Mm-hmm.
you have a slot and you're able to accommodate another client that, let's say they can only pay 70. So if you're able to accommodate them, then that's also availability. So what I'm saying, don't be afraid to reach out to your
Mm-hmm.
resources. So if okay, I have a therapist in my church, maybe they don't want to see me because they know me, but they might know of a therapist that is
Exactly.
Christian, that takes my insurance, So that's, I think, just use that resource. There's directories everywhere, and obviously we can't get into like, okay, well, I can say Psychology Today is one.
Yes.
I cannot vouch for every therapist in psychology.
Exactly. That's what I say.
Do your own research,
Mm-hmm.
and like I said, ask for a consultation, have a consultation. So, if free consultations, talk to them before committing to appointment. Say if they have a free consultation, hey,
Mm-hmm.
and talk to them. If use of filterings, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, that's what I was about to say. Use the filterings because they have where you could click Christian, you could click your insurance, you could click uh whatever issue you're feeling, anxiety, sadness, anger,
Yeah,
whatever it is, or in mail, you can mail online, in
yeah.
person. I mean, Psychology Today does a very beautiful job. The other one that I like is Open Path Collective.
I was gonna say open path collective. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Be-
That when it comes to that was maybe I wasn't gonna say it, so thank you for saying it, but
Mhm.
I thought about it because they offer that specifically for if you're a therapist and you go into that provider network, there's a cap on how much you can charge your client. You're
Yeah.
invited to if
No more
you're
than $70.
okay, that's what it was. I didn't
It's
know that.
40 to $70 for a licensed therapist, and then for a registered intern, I think it's $35 that you're only allowed to charge. But there is a fee that the person has. I'm part of, well,
Oh,
but I only take a certain amount because if not, then I can't. You see these lights and the air is on right now. I have to pay my bills, but that's my contribution now that I'm in private practice is like I take one or two pro bono cases. I take one or to three open path collective, and the rest is full payment. But I put a lot of work in as a therapist, like we've done a lot of work for our clients. And it's not only the 50 minutes that we're with them,
oh
it is
no.
right. I think that's the understanding. Oh, you get paid this much money, 100 and something dollars an hour. I'm like, yeah, but according to how much work I put in, it might not be that much because I'm still thinking about you. I'm still wanting to serve you well. I'm praying for you. I'm finding resources for you. I want you not to be with me for the rest of your life because then I'm not a good therapist. I want you to be healthy and strong and go out there into the world and use your gifts to and then after you're healed in those places, you'll be like, oh, I have a great therapist, and the word of mouth.
Yeah, there you go. The great, yeah, the best marketing tool.
Right. So,
Yeah, so
yeah.
that open path, yeah, all those different directories, and just be able to, like I said, utilize your resources. And I say even before that, just know that you're worth it. Before
Mm,
your worth seeking comes from,
amen.
you're worth it. And that should power, hopefully that invites you to say, you know what, I'm worth looking for help because I'm worth being,
Well, what's the alternative? Because this is something I say a lot too. You're either going to pay for prevention or you're going to pay for intervention,
mhm.
right? Either way, you're going to pay. You're going to pay because if that anxiety or tengo los nervios.
El nervio de punta.
Yes, and that, but guess what? If it's up to there already and you don't take care of it, it's your body keeping the score, telling you to do something. Do one thing. So I know I could talk to you forever about this. I might have to have you back on, or we're going to set up something where we're going to go on tour together.
Good.
with I'm already thinking of all the male panels that can come and we can talk about different cultures and different things for men's mental health, especially in the church. Any final words before and tell the audience how to find you?
Of course, thank you. Just thank you for having me. I think mental health is something that, as I said, we can continue to talk and talk. And I'll just reiterate what I said. You're worth it if you're listening and you are on and if you're listening to Liana and you're in good hands
Oh,
because it's amazing what she does.
thank
And
you.
just know that you're worth it. Seeking counseling doesn't mean you're anything less than what you think, the church, if you're a Christian, doesn't mean you're less Christian or have less faith in what you think you should have. It
Mm,
means you're human.
yes.
And if you are working on your mental health, kudos to you. Continue to do so. And whoever you have as your therapist, it's know that you are important to their life,
Mm,
and that they do honor being in that space for you.
Yeah. Well, if they're a good therapist, some people in our field, and that's in every field, they're just like, what are you doing?
But yeah, hopefully, right? That's a hope. Um, but and if you want to find me, you can do so at a mindfulprocesstherapy.com.
Okay.
You can reach me at by phone number 305-224-6434 or
Mhm.
email Leonardo at a mindfulprocesstherapy.com.
Wonderful. Well, once again, I thank you so much for taking your time. And remember, listener, to trust in the Lord, guard your heart, and renew your mind. Bye. And now for the disclaimer to make sure you understand that you are responsible for you. The content provided on the Holistic Counselor podcast is for entertainment and informational purposes only and is not intended as a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified mental health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical or mental condition. Never disregard professional medical advice or delay seeking it because of something you have heard on this podcast. The views expressed on this podcast are my personal opinions and do not represent the views of any professional organizations with which I am affiliated. Call your doctor, 911, or 988 immediately if you have a medical emergency. The Holistic Counselor podcast does not recommend or endorse any specific tests, physicians, products, procedures, opinions, or other information that may be mentioned on the podcast. Reliance on any information provided by the Holistic Counselor podcast, guests appearing on the podcast at the invitation of the Holistic Counselor podcast, or other listeners to the podcast is solely at your own risk. Confidentiality notice. If you engage with the Holistic Counselor podcast by commenting or posting and are a client, please be aware that you may be revealing information that could compromise your confidentiality. Please remember that disclosing your identity or personal details can be linked to your clinical material. As a therapist, I am bound by confidentiality and will not respond to any disclosures of this type on this podcast. I am committed to upholding the ethics and confidentiality of the therapeutic relationship, which extends to all forms of communication in accordance with the laws and professional guidelines that govern mental health professionals. I want you to know that your privacy is of utmost importance, and you are responsible for protecting it when interacting on this platform or any other public forum. Thank you.